What's in a name? Turns out kind of a lot. I have been very mentally involved in a couple projects for the main channel these last few weeks, so this week's post on the second channel kinda sneaked up on me, and I had not a thing prepared. Y'all gave me a great topic for a quick story, though. Will it actually be quick? Who's to say? After my last video on my experience being homeschooled, upon seeing a completely different name on all of my childhood memorabilia, a bunch of people wanted to know, what's up with that? I think this viewer put it most succinctly. I have actually discussed this before on the main channel on the Stitchery, but it was in the middle of a project video brought up by the display of my childhood Christmas stocking, which also says Kaylee hair. Get out of there. So yeah, I figured I would put the explanation in a video of its own here so that you don't have to dig through 20 minutes of felt and embroidery, unless you wanna. I'm afraid the story is not as enthralling as many of you may desire. But we'll see if I have more thoughts on names in general, because I have definitely ranted about names more than once in the shower. It's all there. The full unresearched TED chat is up here somewhere. It's just a question of whether it wants to come bubbling up at this exact moment. There's bubbling. Names have always been very important to me, which isn't that surprising because language and words and their meanings have always been very important to me. I find it kind of strange, does anyone else find this strange, that we as humans, being obsessed with labels as we are, find a person's name so important. Like, let's be real, have you ever judged someone based on their name, or thought, oh my god, that person is so like their name, or that person's name doesn't fit them at all, or had a name ruined for you because the person bearing it is unbearable? Of course we have. We've literally turned some names into labels. My condolences to every really awesome Karen out there who would never yell at a poor, overworked customer service employee. And yet, despite this high interest in a person's name, despite it being the first and longest lasting label that someone has, we just name babies. What's happening here? Don't nod up on me. We give them the names that we want them to have, and that's it. That's their lifelong label. No input from them at all whatsoever in most cases. Obviously, there are situations where that may be different, and you can legally change your name, blah, 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 we'll get into it. But for those of you who have given someone their lifelong label, what was that like? I've only ever named animals and fictional characters, so I'm genuinely interested in how much thought the average person gives to their child's opinion, whether as a kid or as an adult, of the name that has been placed upon them, without their consent, if we want to be technical. Do you think about whether they'll like it, whether it will fit them, whether they'll feel comfortable with it, whether the spelling of it will be a lifelong annoyance for them, whether they'll feel a connection to its origins? How much consideration of them goes into name choosing, rather than consideration of you, your preferences, or family tradition? I mean, why not be honest here? I would mainly be thinking about my own preferences. It's hard to take into consideration the thoughts and opinions of an adult who will not be an adult for like 18 plus years, depending on how early you start coming up with names. Despite having so far in my life never wanted to raise a child, I still have a list of dream names, you could call them. Miara Juliet, Gloriana Aurora, Nicolette Belle. I have no dream names for male children. None at all. Clearly I was very into flowery and princessy sounding names, but I also really appreciated names like Nicolette because of the options that they provide for a person. Nicolette, Nicole, Nikki, Nick. That is a name that can move with a person. To me, names like that with so many varieties enfolded within them really say, hey, I have no idea who this person is going to turn out to be, so I've given them options. Unfortunately, I don't know that there are a ton of names with 4 varieties tucked neatly inside. All right. We're struggle busting here. Clearly my other dream names were not that shape-shifting, although my favorites always were names that included at least one nickname option, Mia from Miara, and Glory or Gloria from Gloriana. How common are nicknames or various versions of your actual name in other countries? Like if you're from another language or culture, country, I'd love to know. I mean, Matt goes by Matt in America because no one here knows how to properly pronounce Mateus, including kind of me. But in Brazil, I've literally never heard anyone call him Matt. He is Mateus. They also don't have middle names in Brazil, just a massive string of names that they consider all to be their last name. And I'm pretty sure that's common in a lot of Latin and South American cultures. But what about where you're from? Middle names? No middle names? 2 names total? Lots of names, but they're all considered last names? Last name first? I know that's how many Asian cultures do it, but I would assume that it's not all Asian cultures, just due to the variety of countries there. I remember in Iceland, the last names were a combination of the father's name with the word son or daughter on the end. Kind of the same as going back to like Viking time periods. Like Leif Erikson? I hope I'm remembering that right. Feel free to correct me if I have any viewers in Iceland. I don't know that I do. But yeah, to put it in American English, if your name was Peter and your father's name was James, then your name would be Peter Jameson. But your sister would actually have a different last name than you. She would be Hannah Jamesdaughter. It doesn't work as well in English. I think the Icelandic words flowed a little better. But yeah, it was just normal there for children in the same family, 2 kids with the same 2 parents, to have different last names. Fascinating. So fascinating to me. My thread. Names, how they work, why they're given, and the differences around the world. I feel like this is something we should learn more about when we're kids. Like, why is that not a bigger part of childhood education? I would have been fascinated to learn about naming culture around the world. Oh, this is a clumpy little chunk. Anyway, I feel like I've gotten slightly off topic, but then the topic was names, so no, I haven't. We had a naming trope? Guideline? Yo, I can't think of the word right now. We had a thing by which my parents named all 7 of us. C or K. All of our first names started with either a C or a K. Also, none of us had first names that were after someone, like named after your aunt or your grandma or whatever. But I think all of our middle names were after someone, or I might be entirely wrong there. It's a lot of names. But that was true for me. My first name was not after anyone. My second name was after someone. Question for people who are named after someone. Do you have feelings about that? Does it just not matter to you? You don't even really think about it on the regular? Or is it something that you actually think about frequently? Is it something that like makes you feel warm and fuzzy? Or is it something that feels like it was a lot of pressure on you? Do you ever feel like you have to live up to the person you were named after? I got lots of questions for y'all today. I remember being confused, as a very young kid of course, when I realized that other families didn't have a rule by which they named their children. Rule! That's a fitting word, that works. You know, when you're young and you don't have a lot of experience with the world outside of your home or your family, there can kind of be an assumption that the way things are for you is the way that they are for everyone. Some people never grow past that assumption, even in their adult lives. So I totally thought it was a thing. Parents had to choose a letter of the alphabet, at least one. You could do more than one, because we did. And then name all of their kids with that letter. None of this Sarah and John and David and Mary all in one family. What chaos. Nope, that was entirely wrong. Y'all, sometimes I try to do things that I know how to do while filming these videos, and I realize that I don't yet know how to do them subconsciously. Okay, we got this. So yes, my name is Kaylee, not Charlie. It's actually really not Charlie at all, because my middle name is Charlotte. How common is it to go by a nickname of your middle name? I genuinely do not know. I didn't even consider it as an option until college. The end of college, actually, when I realized that the name by which I knew one of my closest friends there was not her first name, but her middle name. For her, that had been a choice made right after birth by her parents, like she had always gone by her middle name. But when I bemoaned to her my dislike of my first name, she was like, okay, just go by your middle one. Revolutionary. So what do I have against my first name? What's wrong with Kaylee? Literally nothing. Nothing in the grand general sense of things. It is a perfectly fine name. It's a lovely name. I have no beef with the name itself. I just didn't like it for me. In fact, I hated it for me. My entire childhood, all the way through age 22, when I finally decided to do something about it, I hated being called by my name. It made me uncomfortable. It made me cringe on the inside every single time. But like most things that made me feel weird when I was a kid, I never told anyone about it. No one else in my family seemed to have an issue with their name. No one else I had ever met had an issue with their name as far as I knew. Humans were just supposed to take the name that had been assigned to them before or right after birth and accept it, fulfill it, become it. I also kind of felt/knew that had I told my mother I didn't like the name she had chosen for me, she would have considered that a pretty massive insult, and she would have been hurt by it. I tried to never bring up things that could be controversial in that way. Weirdly, I was also the only child in our family who did not have a commonly used nickname. I had one nickname as a child. Mooshk. My oldest sister gave it to me, I don't even remember why, and she was the only one who called me that, and then not consistently. It was like a specialty nickname for sometimes. She ended up taking a trip to Russia when she was a young adult and found out that the word mushk in Russian, or at least something that sounds very similar to it, means men's bathroom. So goody! But yeah, everyone else in my family ended up with at least one nickname, if not more, that was frequently and widely used. Not sure why it didn't happen for me. Unfortunately, this meant that I never got any respite from the discomfort of Kaylee. I think the only time I was ever called something else was during this 2-week musical theater summer camp thing that I did in high school. There was another girl there named Kaylee. Also, not a super frequent thing for me growing up. I think the name Kaylee is more common nowadays, but I never met another Kaylee before this point, before, I don't know, age 16. Kayla, yes, but never Kaylee. There was a girl on the PBS show Zoom named Kaylee, spelled Leigh, and I think that was the only one I had ever encountered at all. She was the epitome of what a Kaylee should be. I don't know how to explain it or why, but Kaylee fit her. Anyway, so at this summer intensive camp thing, the drama teacher was like, well, I can't be calling you both Kaylee, that's gonna be confusing. And I volunteered as tribute so freaking fast. I was like, ooh, pick me! I have a solution. You can just call me by my last name, Nebe. While we're here, a note about my last name. No one ever pronounces it correctly on the first try, and I really do not care. It doesn't follow English grammar rules, so why would they? Mostly we get Nebe, following that good old first one long, second one gone rule that we all learn when we're 6 years old. And then that's usually followed by Nebe, but I did once get Nebe, which I really like. Can I officially change the pronunciation of my last name without changing the name itself? Nebe sounds so fancy. For those who have been curious, I don't know the actual origins of Nebe. I love hearing what it means in other languages. I think somebody said that it means the sky in Croatian. I hope I remembered that correctly. That's cool. We've always said in my family that it's German in origin, but we've always said that kind of as yeah, it's German in origin, sure. Not like we have actual research on that matter. And y'all, I felt so much better being called Nebe instead of Kaylee. I don't think it stood out to me at the time, or possibly I just didn't know how to process the feeling that came from that because I had so squashed down the discomfort I had with my name since it didn't appear to be a normal way to feel about things. But looking back now, I can remember feeling so much more comfortable just being called Nebe instead of Kaylee. There was a sense of relief in it. There was also a time in college, some exercise we were doing in drama class, where you had to introduce yourself and then stare at the group of people in front of you for a minute straight in silence, I think. Maybe? I mean, that sounds about right. Drama classes are always a giant bag of, huh? But yeah, I felt super uncomfortable having to say my name too, having to introduce myself, especially in front of a group of people. Although I will note, it was better to me in succession with my last name, if that makes sense. Like, my name is Kaylee Nebe felt not as weird to me as my name is Kaylee. Weird stuff, y'all. I knew it then, I know it now. I'm not saying that this is a thing that a large number of people experience or relate to or care about, but for me, my name not feeling right was just this massive hang-up in the back corners of my brain my entire childhood. Kaylee was also frequently annoying on the practical side of things, and this I'm sure all the Kayleys out there can relate to, because no one ever got it right on the first try. If I said, my name is Kaylee, possibly a little too quietly, maybe at the level of a mumble, but hey, what you gonna do? Inevitably, the person would go, Katie or Haley, and then I'd have to correct them, which is a social experience I totally enjoy. If I was super lucky, the next try would be the other one. Katie the first time, Haley the second time. Haley the first time, Katie the second time. It was always an awkward dance getting to the actual name I had just said. Ironically, this now happens with our dog, because every time somebody says, what's his name, and we say Link, they go, Wink. Good times. There was an incident, in fact, at the library with a clown. Was he a clown or was he just a guy making balloon animals? Not sure. I was like maybe 5, incredibly young, and yet this is viscerally burned into my memory bank. So, you know, careful what you say to kids. I was called up out of this group of kids that was sitting in front of him for whatever this library activity was. I had not volunteered. I know that for sure. But I had been chosen anyway. He was gonna make me a balloon animal. Okay, he asked me what my name was. I said, Kaylee. Katie? He said, Kaylee. I corrected. Haley? He questioned. No, Kaylee. I repeated. Kayla? He persisted. Kaylee! I pronounced clearly, trying my best to hold back tears of confusion and humiliation. Was I so hard to understand? Was I saying something wrong? Was there a cruel joke being played on me in front of this entire group of children and their parents all staring at me as this man repeatedly got my name wrong? The back and forth continued. It continued for a bizarre number of rounds, and I was upset enough that I have to believe it was visible. As we walked out of the library, my mom said, honey, he was trying to make you laugh. I was boggled. I had to ask for clarification because that story seemed so wildly unbelievable. How on earth did he think that purposely misunderstanding me over and over and over again would lead me to chuckle at his antics as a frickin' 5-year-old? Like I said, burned into my memory. Is that incident early enough in my life to be the reason that I was never comfortable being called Kaylee? Hard to say, but I wouldn't rule it out. I was the kind of kid that only had to go through one humiliating experience in order to completely alter my behavior in a desperate attempt to have that never, ever, ever happen again. So, who knows? But I didn't know that you were allowed to just say, hey, I want to be called this, not that. I didn't know I had that kind of power, so I made it to age 22 to graduating college as Kaylee. And then, feeling emboldened and knowing the time was ripe, I made the change. It was not an official change at all, still isn't. Going through the process of legally changing your name here has never felt worth it to me, yet. Changing my email address or phone number was a giant enough pain as it was. But knowing that the move from college to the rest of my life involved a change of scenery, a change of jobs, a change of social groups, a change of essentially everything, it really seemed like the ideal time to make the switch. I could just introduce myself by a different name to every new person that I met. By the same different name to every new person, not a different name to each person. Yeah? What? You get it. They would never know that it was not the name that I had been called for the last 22 years. They didn't need to know. Why would they need to know? I wish it had been that easy. It was not. Turning to my middle name, Charlotte, which I had actually always loved, I considered what felt right to me. This is a name with options. Charlotte, Charlie, Lottie. I chose Lottie. Yeah, I didn't go straight to Charlie. Lottie felt super cute and fun to me, and honestly, I think it's the name I would have loved to go by when I was a kid. But now I was a young adult, and I was off to work at Disney World, where I introduced myself to my new roommates, my managers, my coworkers, my trainers, everyone as Lottie. I was put in the POS system as Lottie. I had Lottie on my name tag. Not all could be that smooth though, because that was not my legal name, and people care about your legal name. So of course, in some systems, in some paperwork, in some places, I was still Kaylee, like on the schedule. Here began what I realized would be a lifelong trade-off. Skip the hassle of legally changing your name, get around the discomfort you feel for your first name, and instead deal with a lot of people who have seen more than one name attributed to you and have a response ranging from light curiosity to melodramatic confusion and lack of understanding. I don't mind the light curiosity, y'all. I totally get it, but you would be surprised at how dramatic the confusion can be. Not here. This was more of a thing in person 10 years ago. I do not direct this at any of you. No one, asked inappropriately or crossed boundaries or anything, and I totally don't mind chatting about it, yeah? Within a couple months, I had realized that Lottie was also not right for me, not now as an adult. It was Charlie. Charlotte was fine too, I didn't mind Charlotte, but Charlie felt good. I really felt nice when I said, my name is Charlie. So I changed it on my name tag, and then my fellow cast members were extremely confused because I would be Charlie here, Lottie on the POS system, and Kaylee on the schedule. I was also constantly moving around to new work locations and working with entirely new groups of people, because that's just a thing that Disney likes to do with their college program kids. I'm gonna sneeze. Goodness. So yeah, there was a lot of explaining and re-explaining and re-explaining. But I accepted it. I was willing to take that on in order to have a name that I actually liked for myself. I started a second job at a theater while I was in Florida that time, and they were similarly confused. One guy took to calling me Kaylee Charlie, or Charlie Kaylee, because he couldn't seem to wrap his head around which one I actually preferred. Or he was trying to flirt. What is with these dudes? Later on, I started working on a cruise ship where they refused to put any name that was not part of my legal name on my name tag. So I could have Charlotte, but I could not have Charlie until a manager approved it several weeks later or whatever. So Matt actually met me as Charlotte. And then I had to tell everyone that I preferred Charlie, and then they were all confused, and I remember him overhearing a crew member saying, Charlotte isn't even her real name. I find it so interesting when people get upset that the name that you've told them might not be your legal name. Why does it matter? If this is the name I prefer to be known as, who cares what my legal name is? Other than legal entities, of course. It's like people think you're lying to them or fooling them in some way. There's some game afoot and they're not in the know. And I'm like, no, you are in the know because you know what name I want to be called. I trusted you with the name that I most prefer, so yeah? But yeah, it kind of took years for the name change to fully stick, for my whole family to transition to calling me Charlie, for people to accept that as the label I would like to be known as. Pardon my poor grammar there. I think it could have been a faster transition if I was a more staunch human being, self-promotional, forthright. If I was more willing to stand up for myself and say what I wanted and make my desires known. I am highly non-confrontational. So for a very long time, I would say something like, yeah, I go by Charlie now, but you can still call me Kaylee if you want, it's fine. And people believed me, fair enough, and continued to call me Kaylee. I had to learn to stop giving people the option to say, my name is Charlie, period. People do ask if Kaylee is my dead name, and without knowing a grand amount about what that term encompasses, I would have to say no, not really. Again, I just don't really have beef with the name. There's no big conflict mixed up with it. While it's obviously tied to discomfort, and I'm very happy to have a label that I feel better about now, it doesn't make me upset or uncomfortable to talk about it or to see it on documents or to see it on my childhood stuff. I think it really wasn't a struggle with my identity, it was more a struggle with societal norms. Looking back, I don't think I was ever subconsciously thinking, well, my name is Kaylee, so I should be more like a Kaylee. I should conform to what a Kaylee is. I need to alter myself to better fit my name or my perception of what my name should be. Instead, I just accepted that my name would never fit me, and I would cringe every time I or someone else said it. Will I ever get around to legally changing it? I don't know. Maybe. The legality stuff is still annoying. With my P.O. box, there was confusion because Mail for Me had a name on it that was not my legal name. And so they were like, please make sure that your mail is addressed to your legal name. And I was like, no, it's gonna come addressed to Charlie. They made a note. I think we're all good now. I have accidentally signed my name as Charlie Nebe on numerous documents before and then gone, that technically makes it not legally binding, doesn't it? So I have to take extra care to make sure that I am writing Kaylee and signing Kaylee on all important documents. But the thing is, I don't really want to fully change my name to Charlie. I like Charlotte. I may want to go by Charlotte someday. So I could remove the Kaylee, but then I would still be Charlotte Nebe, and Charlie would still be a nickname, and it would still not be legal and have confusion around it, so it's like, meh, why bother? That's about it. That's why I changed my name. That's why all my childhood stuff says Kaylee instead of Charlie. Again, not a super dramatic story, no mountains and valleys here, just kind of a trudge through the plains of persnicketyness. To put it in terms the kids like, it was all because of cringe. Going back to that whole thing on naming babies, though, I really think that we should be able to legally change our name quickly and easily, because why are we stuck our entire lives with a label that is so important that everyone knows us by, and yet is not something that we had any choice in? I mean, maybe you love your name, and that's awesome. That's of course the ideal situation. Maybe you didn't love your name at first, but you grew to love it over time. Cool. Very handy, that's great. Maybe you like your name and sound, but your parents tried to get all clever with the spelling and it's a constant annoyance, but then who changes their name in spelling only? I guess you could. I wonder how often that happens. But I'd have to guess that there's some number of people out there who didn't or don't love the name tag that was stuck to them as a baby. And is it so ridiculous for them to want to change it? They should be able to just change it quickly and fairly easily, and I don't just mean where the government is involved. There can be a weird amount of pushback from the humans in your life when you tell them that you want to be known by a different name. Very unnecessary pushback. Actually, the first time that I encountered someone doing a name change was in college, about a year before I made the switch myself. This person was completely altering their name for entirely personal reasons, and they did it legally. And yet it was such a struggle to get everyone to actually start calling them their new name. There was a fair amount of whispered gossip and complaints about how inconvenient it was for us to have to remember their new name. And I am not proud to say that I was a part of these conversations. The reality is that it wouldn't have been that hard to remember their new name if we didn't care so much that they had changed their name, you know? Like, the thing that kept tripping me up was that every time I looked at them, I was like, ooh, you changed your name. Why? Drama. Who said you could do that? And then I was so busy thinking about that, thinking about their previous name, that I was way more likely to use it. A year later, I was like, oh damn! Now I'm on your side of things, and I feel for you. Funny how that goes. People should be able to change their names. And when someone says, this is my name, this is what I want to be called, we should just call them that. Because it's not that hard, and it's not a big deal, and it's not about us. It's their name. Let them decide what it should be. So, told you I had a whole rant on names. This is totally going to be a quick story, she said. Lies. That's fine, everything is fine. Everything is fine. Oh. That one was weird. Did that do anything? Probably not. Does anyone else not at all trust their left hand to hold a mug of coffee? If you're right-handed. Ugh. Upon the like, where even is the thing? Hello, the thing. Okay. Morning butt sounds.